De La Soul. I tell you, that's been the soundtrack of my life. In 1989, I'm at Will Simmons' house in Vandenberg Village, and he tells me, "You got to listen to this thing." And I think he broke out a cassette tape, and he lets me listen to 3 Feet High and Rising. Me, myself, and I. And I remember listening to it, and then we watched the video on Yo MTV Raps at his house, and it was earth shattering for me. It was groundbreaking. I saw these three guys that, hip hop at the time, was like big gold chains, bravado, talking about all this stuff. And then I saw these three dudes and they're rapping and they have phenomenal beats. They have incredible lyrics, but they're rapping about just being themselves and kind of being outcasts. And I remember sitting, and it was a pivotal time in my life because my parents had split up just recently, and not everybody knew that. My brother was the superstar in the town, and I can't imagine what he was going through at the time. But we didn't have enough money to be able to get the clothes that everybody else wanted at Miller's Outpost when I wanted the anchor blue overalls. It was more like my mom was going to the thrift stores before it was vintage and getting a bag deal. She would get this bag and you buy it for 99 or 25 cents, and you could put anything you could fit in the bag. You get it for 25 cents, and my mom could roll things up really well. And so, I had the choice at the time, either go all in on this or, be embarrassed about my clothes. But I remember hearing De La Soul and Me, Myself, and I, and this, it was almost, they were the outcast. They were saying like, it's cool to be kind of nerdy or cool to be different, cool to rock your own style. And I remember at that time deciding that this thrift store stuff that I hated for so much, that was just going to become my style. So I started to look for the ugliest polyester pants. I started to look for the bowling shirts with other people's names on them. And then as I wore them, at first people would be like, "Oh man, what are you doing? What is this?" And then they started to say, which was music to my ears, "Man, your style is different." It wasn't different because I chose it. It was different because of my circumstance. It was different because I couldn't have the things that other people had. Well, I sat down the other day. I was talking to my brother, Big Rob. I love you, man. And he told me he was reading a book called High and Rising, and it's a controversial book because De La Soul has kind of denounced it a little bit, but it was interesting because it really sparked back. Like as I was reading it, and I've been listening to De La, my whole entire life. They're my favorite group of all time. Seen them multiple times in concert, and got to hang out with them one of the times, and in Las Vegas because of DJ 88 Bree Delano and Delano. I want to tell you, I thank you so much. But I got to hang with them. I got to see them. They were the soundtrack of my life because it was like literally they just made it cool to be different. And as I was talking with my brother, he was reading that book. I started reading the book, and then it reminded me of how much I love De La Soul, but not only how much, but why I loved them, because they were always different. They never conformed to the type of music. They didn't conform to trends. They just did exactly what they did. And even though some would say they didn't get critical acclaim, I believe they have critical acclaim in my head, and they set a standard for themselves and a metric for themselves as opposed to just being in the public's eye all the time. What's crazy about it is most people don't know is when streaming services came out in 2005, they were in a lawsuit with Tommy Boy Records. And so none of their stuff was released from 2005 all the way to 2023. That's 18 years. They were in digital purgatory and no one could listen to their music digitally. So no one that didn't have the albums or the tapes could ever listen to them. And, but just imagine staying true. And it was, I believe 3 weeks after Dave, Trugoy, the Dove, passed away, that their catalog was actually released. And so in his lifetime, he never got to see the digital side of the music being, out there. And it had been that type of service had been available for 18 years. And so it was a huge testimony to me to stick to doing what you do as opposed to trying to figure out what will pop, what will blow up, what will be the next hot thing. And my hat's off to you, De La Soul. Someday I'll have you on the podcast because I love you guys, and but this is a shout out to all the outcasts out there, all the people who don't feel maybe that they fit in or that they belong. I want you to know that that's on purpose, and God has a purpose for you. And when you follow that purpose, sometimes it's going to be lonely. Sometimes it won't have critical acclaim, but it will be exactly what He designed for you. And every time that I got to a point, and I tell you, this road of doing things on my own at 45 years old, changing up my my career completely. I was in the professional beauty industry for 25 years, and then at 45 years old, about 5 years ago, I said, "Hey, I'm just going to go headlong into podcasting and go after my speaking career, and kind of leave the other audience behind." And when I did that, it hasn't been the simplest thing, but every single time that I start to think like, "Oh my gosh, what would it be like to, just conform?" I just turn up De La Soul, and I and I do it at the highest level, and my head starts knocking. I start feeling the lyrics, and I realize that God's purpose was just built for me, myself, and I. And in Proverbs 28 today, it encourages us all, the outcasts in all of us, not to conform to this world, even though it may seem like the easier road. The path is narrow, although the blessings are endless. So stick the course. Let's get this party started.
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
There's so many times where, uh, people have asked me like, how are these things going to work? How is this part going to work out? How's that going to part work out? And for me, it's always like I have no idea, but I'll figure it out. When I started in the professional beauty industry, in 1993, it wasn't the most popular profession in the world. People didn't understand it, but because people didn't understand it, I knew that I was on the right course. And so and even with the podcast 5 years ago when I started off, we're now doing, this is episode 636, and people didn't understand it. But I just want to encourage the outcast in all of us, in every person listening. If there's a place in your heart that you're doing something and maybe you're not seeing immediate results, if you're doing the right thing and you're led by God, I tell you, it's incredible. So my hat's off to De La again, greatest group of all time. But it's just been really, really encouraging, and it's been so exciting to be able to see this. So Proverbs 28, as I wrote this morning, I just really poured my heart out. I didn't know if it was going to work out or whatever it was. I just this was what was on my heart in the last couple days, and it's amazing though, because what God is able to do with Proverbs 28, it was written 3,000 years ago, probably. I mean, I don't know that hip hop was on the minds of anyone, King Solomon, anything like that, but it's incredible because I believe that God can bring so many different areas into our lives, and that can make a difference, and He makes sense of things that sometimes don't make sense at the particular time. And in seventh grade, when I heard De La for the first time, it really helped me to understand that it was okay to be yourself. It was okay to not follow the crowd. It was okay to be different, and to you weren't always going to get the rewards that everybody got, but the rewards would be endless if you stuck the course. And so I want to thank you guys for tuning into Inchstones. There's another episode, small little things that you can put in place that will become, when celebrated, they'll become the milestones as we pile up those Inchstones. So in verse 1 and 18 of Proverbs 28 is when you know you're doing the right thing, the immediate results become irrelevant. Now, I tell you, probably one of the easiest things to say, harder to do, and probably the hardest, or they're harder to hear, hardest to do. And this part is pretty wild because, when we say it, it sounds so good. When you know you're doing the right thing, but how do we know we're doing the right thing? Well, the only way that I've found that I know that I'm doing the right thing is when I'm in touch with God, when I'm having time with Him, and that I'm almost, Xing out the world that is saying, that you have to do these things, you have to do this, you have to do that, and you have to do this for views, or you have to do this in your business, or you have to do it this way. And I believe that, if you're led, um, if you're led and you stay in touch with God's purpose for your life, He will direct all of your steps. He directs the steps of a righteous man. So in verse 2 and 17, circumstances will test your foundation. Choose wisely, when no one is looking, and before money gets involved. I talked about this in my book, The Vibe, and it's so easy to make choices that are principle based when money's not involved. But once money gets involved, that's when the challenges happen. And so what I would invite you to do is sit down and look at the principles that you want to be able to have and commit to them before money ever gets involved. Because if you don't, money will sway that, or fame will sway that, or influence will sway that. So I just be conscious of it as much as possible. In verse 3, 15, and 27 is love those around you as opposed to trying to please the masses. De La Soul was so great at this. They stuck to their guns. They made music that was amazing. And, when Dave passed away in, what was it, February? It was February 12th of 2023. People started talking about him as one of the greatest MCs of all time, but they didn't say that. They didn't say that much when he was alive. And I find that people do this. They appreciate people once they're gone. But what I would suggest is appreciate the people around you now. Don't wait until a catastrophe happens. Call them today. If you're having a challenge with your mom, your sister, your brother, your cousin, whatever it is, or a friend, just call them today. Make it better. And I tell you, sometimes you won't have the time. We never know what is going to happen. We're not promised tomorrow. So do that now. And don't look towards the masses, but lock into the person that is right in front of you. My brother told me this, Big Rob, he said to me, it's not about having impact in the world. It's about impacting the 4 or 3 or 2 people around your dinner table. And that's the thing that really matters. And he not only says that, but he lives it. In verse 4, you were built for a unique purpose, so stay that way. I heard Tim's story the other day, and he said that, you were built unique, so don't die a copy. And it hit me so hard because so many times we have the tendency, I did this the other day. I had something. Now, when I say that it went viral for me, right? Just this is the way that we used to say it back in the day, is I got a new car to me. It wasn't like we got it new off the lot. It was just new to us and to our family. Well, I had a post go viral on TikTok to me. So it had just under 100,000 views on it. And I started to look at it and be like, oh my gosh, what did I say that people liked? And then I had to snap back and say, you know what? Don't be swayed. Don't be swayed, by recognition. I was built to be unique. Don't try and copy something, right? So in verse 5, 16, and 21 is don't be swayed by the moment. Stay grounded in the truth. And where can we find the truth? We can find the truth in wisdom. And where can we find wisdom? The beginning of all wisdom is the fear of God. The fear of God is just the respect of God. So when we spend time with Him, it's amazing because we won't be swayed by the moment. Circumstances have the tendency to sway us, but what God is calling us to do is to look at the truth. Look at the truth of the scenario and don't be swayed by the circumstances. In verse 6 and 12, being yourself is the reward. And this is probably one of the hardest things that you'll ever work with, because a lot of times people are like, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. And then you see somebody else maybe move faster than you are or get rewarded at a higher level. But I tell you, when you get to the point, and this is what God was saying this morning, being yourself is actually the reward. And as opposed to looking like, oh, I'm myself, so what reward do I get? Being yourself is the reward. I promise you, it will create pull marketing as opposed to push marketing, as opposed to pushing it out to every single person that you possibly can. Those people will be drawn to you because you're just being yourself and who you're designed to be. And I want to encourage that as much as possible. In verse 7, 11, 23, The discernment muscle is mandatory in this world of shiny silliness. Shiny silliness is all around us. It's the things that are constantly will entice us. But just be conscious of this because the discernment muscle. Discernment comes from discretion. Discretion comes from insight. Insight comes from understanding. Understanding comes from knowledge. Knowledge is worthless unless you have wisdom, and wisdom comes from the fear or respect of God. And the only way that we could respect God is by spending time with Him, seeing His words and His actions. And when they're in line, then you start to have that respect, and that'll create the wisdom, which will bring knowledge, which will bring understanding, which will bring insight, which will bring discernment, and which will ultimately create discretion in your life. So just be conscious of those things. Let's go to verse 8, 13, and 22 of Proverbs 28. What does it profit? What does it profit you to gain the world and lose your soul? I've heard this over and over again, and I look at it and I think about De La Soul. They could have changed up their musical taste, all the things, but they stuck to their guns, even though it wasn't critical acclaim, which I think Me, Myself, and I and 3 Feet High and Rising, probably one of the greatest albums of all time. And then De La Soul is Dead. And if you listen to that, De La Soul is Dead, it's unreal. And then Balloon Mind State, I think their best album they've ever done. But it didn't get a critical acclaim. It wasn't, most people don't know even one hit on it, although I know all of them, and I absolutely love it. Break at Dawn was an unbelievable song. That whole entire album, Balloon Mind State, was phenomenal. But the world wasn't saying that. It wasn't top on the charts. But just because it's not top on the charts doesn't mean that it's not phenomenal. So in verse 9 and 14 is listen and apply wisdom. This is a simple one, but it talked about it twice in this, and in 9 and 14, listen and apply wisdom at all costs. In verse 10, 20, and 25, longevity is more valuable than a one-hit wonder. We all know that one-hit wonder that we think, oh man, I remember that song, but I don't know who they are. Well, De La Soul is not only amazing from their beats, their lyrical content, just who they are, being themselves, but also a rap group in hip hop from 1989 to this present day, still together, still making music, with the exception of Dave, because Dave moved on to heaven. But I mean, they stayed together. That in itself should be Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They should be the next ones in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. De La Soul, honestly, they paved the way for a whole different genre of music, for it to be okay in hip hop, that you didn't have to be, gangster, that you didn't have to be, dancing around in shiny suits and have the craziest videos, that you could just be yourself and have a phenomenal message. That's what they did. And so they laid the groundwork for that. In verse 19, your land is unique and plentiful, so work it with all you have. And my hat's off to De La Soul, because they did this over and over again. They worked their land. They made their music. And, when Stakes is High came out, it was a little bit different. And then Bionics came out, and, the Grind Date, and, it just unreal music. But most of us didn't get a chance to be able to listen to it because it wasn't streaming on the platforms. But just because it's not streaming on the platforms and available to everybody doesn't mean that it's not amazing and that they stayed true to who they were. And so in verse 26, being yourself takes faith in God. The payoff is immense and always unconventional. And so I want to say to DJ Maceo, to Pastanus, who I've met multiple times, and to Dave, who is in heaven, like this verse in 26 was exactly who you guys are. Be yourself. Being yourself takes faith in God, because it would have been easy for them to just say, well, we could just adjust. We don't have to stay true to this part of it. But they did. And the payoff was immense, although it was unconventional. And I hope someday the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame understands and realizes how important De La Soul has been to not only hip hop, but music in general, and to so many kids out there like myself that were struggling with their identity, were struggling with challenges in their life, and thinking that, oh man, I didn't fit in. And they unbeknownst to them, helped to shape a career. First in the professional beauty industry, and then at 45 years old, just switching it up and saying, I want to go into podcasting, and I want to just speak, a keynote speaking. And I wanted to do that and just shifted it up. But it was to the soundtrack of Me, Myself, and I. It was to the soundtrack of that, which has been the soundtrack of my life. So thank you, Dela. And I look forward to having you on the podcast at some point. Being yourself, in Proverbs 28, verse 28, as we finish up, is being yourself has no expiration date. And Dela has showed that over time. I used to think that the word outcast was a bad thing until De La Soul helped me to realize that it was something to be proud of. It simply meant that you were misunderstood by the people that were wanting to be the same as everybody else. And that's okay. And it's not a condemnation on people that didn't understand the things that were happening, or didn't understand when someone was different. It's just a compliment to those people that have that little outcast in them. And I believe that all of us do, where we want to march to the beat of our own drum. We want to, test things out. We want to try things, but sometimes we're a little bit scared and a little bit apprehensive because someone is going to say something, or maybe the world, that's not exactly the way that the world would tell you how to be. And what God is saying to you is that you were built absolutely unique. You were built for this time. You were built for this purpose. And He wants you to know that there was no one else built like you. And when we stay in communication with God, as opposed to looking to the world, what will start to happen is that we will accept His purpose. We will accept His plan. We will accept His timing, which is never the same as ours. And it'll keep us in a space where we're always doing what we're designed to do, as opposed to what the world would tell us to do. So my hat's off to you, De La Soul. I look forward to, again, having you guys on the podcast at some point to be able to talk about this and let you know how much you have inspired me. Listen to the music today, and I actually put a playlist on my Substack. If you want to read with us, it's on Substack. You want to listen and watch, you're doing it right now on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. If you want to experience it, it's at the Vibe Experience. And if you want to engage, I can come in and speak for your company, your conference, or your convention, which I'm doing for BITAC with the hospitality industry this weekend, and bringing a message that way. But I want to thank you guys all for tuning in. The greatest compliment that you could ever give me is to leave a comment and share this with a friend. So I hope you have a phenomenal Friday. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make